Again, welcome in. This is the final of the series, the virtual professional learning series that ODE is offering to Oregon educators. This one is facilitating meaningful historical conversations for the social sciences, and we are really excited to be here with you all today. We're going to start with some really quick introductions. My name is Brittany Chambers. I am a research and technical assistance specialist at WestEd. I'm coming to this work with much experience. I used to be a previous middle school social studies teacher and assistant principal, worked in higher ed. And so I come to this work with many of my lenses and a lot of experience, but definitely here to collaborate and facilitate and work together with you all. And I'm going to pass it over to my co-facilitator so he can introduce himself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Raul Rosario. I'm an equity program manager here at West Ed. Like Brittany, I also have a plethora of experience in the classroom as a middle school ELA teacher, as well as a humanities instructional coach all across the country. I'm very excited to be here today and look forward to learning from you all.
Thank you, Roland. Now we're going to have some of our ODE representatives introduce themselves and welcome you all here.
Yes, thank you, Brittany. And my name is Amy Kabrowski. I'm the social science specialist at the Department of Education. Vanessa can't be here tonight, but she would also be welcoming you in. And so thank you all for coming on this beautiful Oregon evening. Um, we're really excited. This is our fourth virtual professional learning, as Brittany said. We have a couple in-person things coming up. So if you're not coming to one of those, maybe someone from your district is coming to those. We have one in Bend and Eugene and another one in Clackamas throughout April and May. So looking forward to sharing some of this learning there. And then we also will have uh, modules available after June 30th so that you can use what you learned today and even more from those modules with your district and your school. So today's event today's learning is really centered around this idea of how to really discuss the things that are in the new standards, some of the topics that are different from years before when we built a more inclusive set of standards, when we worked on expanding the narrative. We worked on creating a more complete history of Oregon, of the United States, and the world. Some of those topics are things that maybe schools have not talked about or that people find difficult to talk about. And so WestEd helped design this learning to really think about ways to connect with community and collaborate around teaching these topics to students. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Amit. First thing we're going to ask you to do this evening is to go ahead and rename yourself in Zoom. So if you go to participants, so if you select participants down at the bottom of your toolbar in the meeting window, you'll hover over your name and select more, and then you're going to rename yourself and add either K5, 6-8, 6-12. If you work with everybody in the entire spectrum, you can say K-12, but we really need you to go ahead and rename yourself now. And if you need some help, we have some Zoom tech here on the call who can definitely support you with that. We'd like to start this session with an inclusive welcome and kind of setting the stage so we can know why we're here, what we're here to discuss, and kind of name some things that we are going to be discussing today. So before we get started, we are going to ask you to go ahead and drop in the chat your role, so your title, what you do, your region where you're located across Oregon, and then also what is your favorite event or time period in history that you like to learn about or teach. As social science educators and the lovers of history, I know we all have that one thing that we really get amped about when it comes to teaching or learning about. So we would love to hear those. Please, please, please drop those in the chat. And feel free to tell us your favorite thing to teach or learn about in history. I know there's a unit out there that you all love to learn about, love to discuss. So feel free to drop that in the chat. Or come off mute. It's a small group of us right now, so feel free to come off mute if you want to introduce yourself out loud. Okay, maritime aspects of the Underground Railroad, post-war human and civil rights movements. Thank you. Please continue to drop those into the chat. Thank you so much for that. We're going to keep it moving and talk a little bit about our agenda, but please don't stop. Drop those in the chat. Would love to hear about what you guys love to teach and where you're from and what you do. Again, we started with our inclusive welcome. We're going to move into setting the stage. We're going to get into some engaging strategies around creating safe and supportive learning environments, building community with families, content engagement models, and then last but not least, best practices showcase where we navigate some critical conversations. And all of these are rooted within a vignette that you'll be working with. And we'll kind of just, work through the vignettes, work through the scenarios. And then we'll end with an intentional close and then some next steps. And we'll talk about some additional resources and offerings that ODE has prepared for you all. Now to the good stuff. So we have made a workbook for you as we are in this session, so you can feel really immersive and really engaged. This workbook takes you through everything that we're going to be going through. And so if you look in the chat, you can find the link to the workbook. Feel free to make a copy. And then you can follow along with us. Again, each section that we're going to go through is outlined in the workbook. There's space for you in the workbook to write your notes and conceptualize your ideas. There's also links in the workbook for you. So the fact sheets that we're going to talk about and many of the resources that we'll be talking about are linked in that workbook. So please get the workbook. It is a resource to you. It's something that you can use and pull things from in your classroom or with your colleagues. So please get the link, and it is in the chat. And if you have any troubles with that link, feel free to let us know. Just want to go over some of our learning goals for this session. We want to be able to help you all learn how to create safe and supportive learning environments, facilitate meaningful classroom discussions, and engage families and communities about sensitive topics. So these are our overall learning goals. It's what our sections are rooted in throughout the entire session. And we hope that when you leave here, you feel like we really tackle these things and you feel more confident going into having these conversations with students and with families. Here's just a moment to highlight the social science standards. We've shared these at every session, and so we wanted to share them here. If you don't know where they are, if you haven't seen them in their entirety, here they are. You can pull out your phone and scan the QR code. You can also get the link out of the chat where you can find the social science standards, but they are here for you to peruse. Here's just some standards that we are grounding our work in this evening. So we've pulled a standard from high school, middle school, and elementary. These are all new standards that were just recently introduced. They all are kind of talking about some of those critical, meaningful, historical conversations that we know that some of our teachers are concerned about having. So these are just some standards. You'll see these again, but we wanted to go ahead and highlight these at the beginning so that you can know the standards that will kind of be guiding our time together today. Now we want to name the elephants in the room. So we want everyone to feel safe here, feel like they can speak their truth, speak their I statements, and not feel, any judgment around that. And so we just want to name the elephants in the room. We prioritize race in the center of our work and what we do. We talk about culture and identity. It's important to this work. It's important to historical understanding. We talk about student, family, community groups, beliefs, stereotypes, and prejudice. We also talk about school, community, state, and national issues or challenges. And so those are just some of the elephants that we know sometimes people tend to avoid when it comes to having these critical conversations, but here we embrace them. This is a safe space, and we want to make sure people know that. So we're going to do a very quick engagement activity, and we actually had planned to whisk people away into some partners, but given that we are here as a very small, intimate group this evening, we're going to keep it here, right? And so we want to talk about a little bit of having difficult conversations, and we want you to recall a time when you experienced that difficult conversation in an educational setting, and tell us what made the conversation comfortable for you or what you would have needed to have a comfortable conversation. And so that's really what we want you to think about right now. You can start pondering that. And the reason we want you to think about this and why we wanted to kick off this session with this particular engagement activity is because of the three components that you see on the screen, right? We want to build your cultural competency, helping you understand diversity and how it increases cultural awareness. We want to enhance empathy and understanding. So recognizing that diverse perspectives foster empathy and that it's important that we embrace each other and different in our differences. And then lastly, we want to do some community building, right? Acknowledging that diverse perspectives helps us build strong communities. So when we all are talking about our differences and creating community amongst each other, it is a benefit to us all. So we want you to think about, again, that difficult conversation in an educational setting. And so I'm going to pause for 60 seconds. We're just going to have a collective breath here. And I want you all to think, self-reflect, and then we're going to come back as a group here and share out about these difficult conversations. So take a second, take a minute. I know a minute can seem like a long time, but we are going to come back now. I hope you had a moment to just think about that difficult conversation in an educational setting. And I'm going to invite some of you all to just share and what made the conversation comfortable for you or what you would have needed to have a comfortable conversation. And so we want to invite anybody to just come off mute and join us in the space and share. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's definitely one that our kids have seen in the media, on social media. It's very much a difficult conversation to have. So thank you for bringing that forward and sharing that. I want to welcome others into the space to come off mute and also share. And don't be scared to show us those smiling faces. I know you all might be busy multitasking, but don't be scared to show us your faces. I promise you we don't bite here. But while we wait, I'll share because I want to model. Sometimes that we have to step up and model. I know I'm making space for you all. This might give you the courage to share as well. But a difficult conversation that I had was in my classroom where it was Black History Month. We were preparing for our Black History projects. And one of my white students who was in my class, and I went to it, my school was, let's just say, 95% Black. So not that many white students at my school, but she had many of Black friends. Everyone loved her, but she just raised her hand and asked the question, why don't we have a White History Month? And all of the Black kids in the class was like, why would you ask that question? Why? And I'm like, wait a minute. We're going to have a real conversation here because that's a valid question. She genuinely wants to know. Let's really have a conversation. And she was genuinely asking me real questions about the history and, what are the difference? She was like, but you teach us about everybody in this class. So it wouldn't seem like everyone would need a month or anybody would need to feel special. And I had to explain to her that although I'm going out of my way to make sure that everybody's stories and perspectives are included in my classroom, that's not necessarily how everyone is approaching history or how they are teaching history history in their classroom. And so I'm making sure that we all feel our backgrounds and where we come from feel special here. But that may not be the experience you all have when you go into other classrooms where they are teaching history. So, we had to have that conversation, but we had it out loud in front of everybody. And I will say this, we would not have been able to have that conversation in my classroom had we not created a culture in the classroom where people could raise their hand and ask that question. Although the students looked at her and said, "Why did you ask that question?" She felt comfortable enough and confident enough to raise her hand and ask it. We had a conversation as a class, and her Black History project was great. She killed her Black History project. She loved doing it. And it was just a great moment because I just felt like I'm so glad she felt okay to raise her hand and just ask the question. As I'm sure there may have been somebody else thinking the same thing in the classroom as well. So I'll pause and again make room for anybody else to share. Very brave young girl, very brave, still brave, actually doing really well for herself even today. She'll be graduating college next year, and I can't believe I was her sixth grade social studies teacher, which goes to show that time's been flying by.
My girl Lauren went on a Mormon mission. So yeah, we're just so proud of all our kids.
We are. Well, guys, I am going to keep it moving as I know you might be warming up and, kind of getting warmed into the space. So I'm going to turn it over to Rolyn and we are going to keep the show moving.
Thank you, Brittany. And so, I think those were some great examples that lead us to really talking about creating safe and supportive learning environments, right? Without creating those environments, it's probably not likely that these students would have raised these types of questions in both Lois and Brittany's classrooms, right? And so, one step that we can take to create the conditions for a safe and supportive learning environment is really through the creation of community agreements. And I think community agreements really form the foundation for psychological safety in our classrooms that allow our students to take intellectual risks, share their diverse perspectives, and engage in authentic learning. When students feel safe, they're willing to participate, they're willing to ask questions, and they're willing to challenge their own thinking. And so community agreements are mutually established guidelines that members of a group or organizations agree to abide by. They serve as a framework really for behavior, interactions, and ensuring a respectful and productive environment. Now, these agreements can really be tailored to fit the unique needs and values of each community. So they might look differently in your classrooms, right? In your first period, they might not be the same as in your seventh period. And so really the power of these agreements lies in their collaborative creation. When students participate in developing the norms that will govern their classroom experience, they really develop a sense of ownership and responsibility toward maintaining those norms. So the process itself is a valuable learning opportunity that teaches students how to engage in the democratic process and really consider and uphold the needs of the collective. Next slide, please. Now, creating community agreements allows educators to meet Section 4 of the standards entitled Transformative SEL and Social Science Instructions. So educators are tasked with establishing caring, nurturing, and active social science learning environments, which include for social and emotional learning to be transformative. The practices and approaches require setting the conditions for nurturing and attending to personal and collective well-being. So what does this look like in practice? Imagine a middle school classroom where I used to teach, where students have co-created an agreement about respectful disagreement. When studying historical, controversial events, students can really refer to these agreements to navigate some of the difficult conversations that might arise. As a class, though, we may want to first unpack what does being respectful actually mean, as we know that that word may differ in different cultures, right? And folks might have a different understanding of what respect means. But we want to make sure that students are aligned to what respect will mean for our class moving forward. So as a teacher, I had students create some hand signals to indicate when they wanted to build upon somebody's ideas or agree with those ideas, or maybe even offer a different perspective, right? Making the flow of conversation visible and allowing for students to really express themselves. Additionally, I think community agreements are really incorporate culturally responsive practices that really affirm and honor students' identities. So, for example, a high school teacher might include an agreement about honoring the diversity of languages in the classroom, allowing students to code switch when it helps them express complex ideas. So, when I taught eighth grade, I had students read Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, and some of my students were like, Mr. Rosario, I don't want to read in this Shakespearean language. Can I put some Jamaican flavor into this? I was like, hey, let's do it. And so some of my students like to read in their natural accent. That didn't take away from the words, that didn't take away from the learning, but it made them feel comfortable to understand and navigate some complex issues that they may not be connecting with. I think community agreements should also incorporate some systemic approaches that really consider the role and impact of our broader society. So, for example, in an elementary classroom, this might look like an agreement to question unfair rules when studying historical events, right? Providing students with some opportunities to really reflect upon their emotions related to biases, discrimination, or the unfair treatment of others. So these are just some examples of how these things might come to life in your classroom. And so today we want to offer you all some working agreements that we usually put forth in some of our professional development sessions for adults. Now, although these are for adults, we want you to think about how might you construct some working agreements and offer some of these community agreements to your students. So the first here is focusing on impact versus intent. We acknowledge that regardless of our intentions, our words and our actions can impact others in ways that we might not anticipate. And so we prioritize addressing these impacts. So in your classroom, this might look like helping students understand that saying, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, doesn't erase the hurt that they may have caused. The second working agreement is to expect and accept non closure. Some discussions may not reach a neat conclusion, and that's okay, right? We're not going to get through everything in a 2 hour session sometimes. Learning is an ongoing process. And so, an agreement like this might teach our students to really sit with the complexity and uncertainty, a crucial skill that they're really going to need to successfully navigate our world today. The third working agreement that we offer here, or community agreement rather, is speak your truth. Use I statements. We value authentic perspectives, and using I statements really helps us share personal experiences without generalizing or speaking for others. So for elementary students, you might simplify this and say, use your own words to tell your story. The last community agreement that we offer here is permission for collective breath. We recognize the importance of pausing, reflecting, and giving space for everyone's voice and processing time. In practice, this might mean implementing think time, as I'm sure all of us are familiar with, before discussions, or allowing students to write before they speak, right? And again, we want you all to feel as this is an interactive session and participatory section. So we encourage your active participation and making sure that these agreements are meaningful for our community. So now that we've offered some of our agreements, it is your turn. So let's consider what agreements we might want to elevate today from the ones that I've just offered, or we want you to think about, are there any other agreements that you might want to add? Is there something that should be removed? Or is there an agreement that we need to unpack further as a group? So take the next couple of minutes to think about these questions and place anything that you'd like in the chat, or feel free to unmute.
And I'm gonna play some tunes while we wait, while we think about these community agreements.
Cause
Alrighty. I see in the chat, Brittany placed an agreement that was shared yesterday. Replace certainty with curiosity. Any other takers? Any other folks want to share any new community agreements? Absolutely. I think, one of the beauties of working agreements is that, they're living, breathing documents, right? We need to be able to respond to our students and our classrooms' evolving needs. So they shouldn't be things that are just set in stone, right? Or, you shouldn't approach things in that way because, like you said, things can change. Folks can have different thoughts and change their opinions, right? And so I think I want to encourage folks to, use this as a strategy in your classroom, but don't just do it in the beginning of the year and then, all right, that's it. These are our working agreements and we're going to post them and then we're going to forget about them, right? We really want to encourage you all to revisit these agreements and have students reflect on which agreements are working well, which need to be adjusted, or if there's a particular unit that you might be delving into, that you might need to revisit these agreements, right? So again, just a strategy for you all to use as you're thinking about how to create these supportive learning environments. I think, the process of creating some of these agreements sometimes is as valuable as the agreements themselves because you can engage in that discussion and you have that opportunity to maybe change your mind about something, right? And so when students are participating in creating and establishing the norms that govern their own learning environments, they develop those skills, right? Those social emotional skills like perspective taking, communication, collective responsibility. And so you're not just creating the rules, you're really modeling for them the democratic processes and empowering them as students to be active participants in shaping their learning communities. So with that, we're gonna go ahead and move on. And as you see here, we've put some of the working agreements that some folks have put in the chat. And let's, as we go through this session, make sure that we're referring back to these, upholding these, and bringing them up if there's any difficult conversations that arise.
Thank you so much, Rylan. And so we're going to move and jump right into like the interactive parts, the sessions, the scenarios. And the first part of that is building community with our families. And what does that look like? Why do we say start with families? We say start with families because before your students come to you and when they leave you, they go back home every day. And so having that connection with parents and with families makes your job easier as an educator. And it also makes the parents' job easier at home. When you all are on the same page, it creates a truly a balanced educational experience for our students. And so the importance of engaging families, it is linked to better academic performance and increased motivation among students. So when students know, you can say, John, I'm going to call your mom, and he knows that you and the mom are actually on talking terms, or you will send a letter home and mom will see it. That kid is more likely to behave better, to perform better. And so having that relationship with our families and with our parents is really important. It also allows for families to truly integrate and appreciate the diverse culture and backgrounds of the students in their, in their children's classes and the students attending the school and the different parents. So it just allows parents to be able to see what's going on, who are the other kids in the classroom, and just allows everyone to be able to build a community together. What we say, it takes a village to raise a child. So when we reach out to our parents, we are really creating that village. And then last but not least, it creates an informative dialogue between families and educators, which fosters nurturing learning environments. And again, when you and families, when teachers and families, when administrators and families, when specialists and families, coaches and families, when counselors and families connect and work together, it just makes everything in the day-to-day life for that student so much better. It makes the day-to-day life of the parents better. And it ultimately creates an environment where students can feel safe, where they can come to their teachers, they can go to their parents, and they can feel like they are getting the support that they need holistically from everyone. And so the importance of engaging families starts at the beginning of the school year. We don't want you to wait. And believe it or not, our families and our parents, they want to learn as well. One thing I found for myself when I was a teacher with engaging families at the beginning of the school year is that I sent home a newsletter, but I also dedicated time to trying to call each parent. So I told myself within those first 2 to 3 weeks of school, before we get into the nitty gritty, I am going to contact or at least reach out to every single parent. I went and stood at the car lot, the car rider line after school. I'm like, wait a minute, where's my kids? I had them stand by me. All of my kids stand by me. So when your parents come pick you up, I can make contact, whether it was a grandparent, an uncle, somebody got to meet me in that child's life to be able to build that community. And so they knew when I said, I'll call your big brother or I will call your auntie or your uncle, they knew I meant it. They knew Miss Chambers was very much going to call them. And so I know that takes time. One thing I can suggest to educators is, one call a day. If you pick 5 kids every week, one call a day. If you have 30 kids in your class, or if you have 30 kids in each class, you pick one kid out of each class a day. It can take you 15 minutes, literally 15 minutes, unless you get a talkative parent, but it can take you 15 minutes on your teaching planning time right at the end of the day. So I used to do it as soon as the bell would ring. I go back to my classroom, close the door, call my parents. And I learned to call them not just about bad things, but about good things, right? Remembering to do that. And so again, when you engage with your parents at the beginning of the school year, you make space for you to be able to have those conversations with parents, those difficult conversations with parents later on in the school year. So I just wanted to definitely surface that and really hit that point home. They make all the difference. And it's important that we, again, make contact with our parents as early as possible so that we can build that trust with them. That was a word that kept coming up yesterday in our session, was trust, building trust with parents. And so we want to kind of go through some quick examples of maybe how these conversations might play out. We know this is very, very, structured. But again, these are just some examples and some ways you can address this. And so, Raylene, I'm going to invite you to be the parent and I'm going to read the response.
So what is the purpose of these new standards? There was nothing wrong with the old ones.
Well, the purpose of the new standards are to provide a comprehensive and more complete understanding of history, inclusive of all people's perspectives, making sure we don't leave anyone out.
And I heard that these new standards are going to make certain students feel bad.
Trust me, we are committed to creating an inclusive classroom environment where all our students feel safe and respected, where no students feel like they're being attacked or anything like that.
But American history includes everyone. There's no need to change anything.
And exploring challenging historical events like slavery, the Holocaust, and the treatment of Indigenous people more deeply aids in helping students promote a more inclusive society for everyone. So although it includes everyone, we just want to dig a little deeper and get into the details.
So how can I support my child's learning at home?
We are happy to help. We're here to support you in discussing these topics at home. If you need resources, please feel free to reach out. Together, we can provide a balanced educational experience for your child. So again, we know those are very structured and ideal, but these are just some things that you can say. Keep it short, keep it direct, and hit on the point that these new standards are about being inclusive for all students. Just emphasize that. It's for everybody. It's not just for a particular group. It's for everybody. And if you hit on that point, a lot of times most people will say, okay, well, if it's for everybody, or they'll ask a follow-up question. But again, these are just some examples of ways you can kind of de-escalate some of those conversations. So we're going to move into our first small group engagement session for today. It's a short one. It's going to get us talking through our first scenario. We have scenarios made out for elementary, middle school, and high school. And I know we have a small group here today, but we're still going to get in our groups and we're going to come and discuss with you in these groups. And we're going to take, like I said, 6 minutes in these groups, come back really quickly, share out actually, we're going to do 5 minutes, come back, share out as a whole group, and then we're going to keep our session moving. You can check in the chat right now, the link to your group vignette. So if you are elementary, there's one for you, middle school and high school. Our tech team is going to put you in the group that you identified on your name tag. So whether you said you were elementary, middle school, or high school, they are going to put you in the group. And then we will go from there. Does anybody have any questions before we move into these groups? And before we move, Tech, I'm so sorry. The questions, right, on the screen is what we want you to consider, is what we want you to think about. These are also in your workbook. But what communication should happen with parents before the lesson or at the beginning of the year? Consider how to explain the sensitivity and importance of the topics to parents. And then lastly, discuss strategies for ensuring parents feel informed and involved in knowing what's going on in the classroom. Welcome back in, everyone. I know those sessions were quick, but you'll get some more time to meet with the people that you were just with. But we want to go through the scenarios really quickly here and what you guys discussed. How would you address these first, this part one of the scenario? And you can just come off mute. You don't have to raise your hand or anything like that. Or if you would feel better dropping it in the chat, you can drop your comments in the chat. So these are the scenarios on the screen that each group had to address. And I believe we only have a middle school and high school group here today. So we'll focus on those. But what are our thoughts? I appreciate that honesty. Thank you. Anybody else want to respond to the high school group, from the high school group? We know Mr. Mr. Wynn's school did not notify parents about the new standard. So we can already imagine that there is going to be something that likely gets back to those parents about these new standards. So definitely something to consider as you all are thinking about how to engage parents at the beginning of the school year. Anything from our middle school group? If not, Roland, I'm going to invite you to give us some of your expertise on how you would handle that scenario, part one, from a middle school teacher yourself.
I think for me, keeping in constant communication with folks and sort of, I don't want to make it seem like because we're approaching a so-called sensitive topic that we're automatically going to be sending a letter. I think communication should be sent out and consistently for every unit that you might plan, right? Like, hey, we're going over these topics. We're talking about federally recognized tribes. Here's what this means for us. Here are some important concepts that you might want to know. If I was in Oregon, I would link them to the fact sheets that we're going to share with them and say, hey, here are some resources that you can use at home. And here are some of the things and topics that we'll be discussing in our classrooms, and sort of leaving that open line of communication with parents, allowing them to ask questions, being available by phone, by email to answer any questions or concerns that may come up.
When our students can definitely bring things to the classroom. And I think looking at these three scenarios right here on screen, we can see that, our fourth grade teacher definitely took an approach of, sending something home, a note to parents. Our middle school teacher sent a note home and welcomed thoughts or concerns. And then Mr. Wynn, school did not notify the parents. And I think sometimes that likely happens in high school where we sometimes feel like we don't need to reach out to parents, but it's likely just as important or more important to reach out to those parents. And just because those students are even more vocal. So thank you all for participating in part one. We're going to keep it moving into the next section. But before we get there, I just want to highlight these fact sheets that we have created and co-facilitated with ODE for you all. So this is the Ethnic Studies and Holocaust fact sheet, just a quick snapshot of them, but we do have additional ones: the genocide fact sheet, the essential disciplinary practice fact sheet, tribal community, and underrepresented students fact sheet. These are fact sheets you can share with your parents. They're not just for educators. So if parents are interested, they want to know a little bit more, they can dive a little bit deeper and very quickly into the standards, the fact sheets. There's even questions there for them to think about and ponder on. So these can be a resource, not just for educators in the classroom, but also to share it with our parents when they're asking questions or they're asked that question, how can I support my child's learning at home? Please point them to these fact sheets, and you'll be able to access these in your workbook, but also later on the ODE social science webpage. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Roland to get into some content engagement models.
Thanks, Brittany. And so as educators, we know that classroom engagement is foundational to creating some transformative learning experiences for our students. And we'll talk about a couple of strategies here that, could be used as essential tools for really building these inclusive, safe, and supportive learning communities where students feel valued and empowered to contribute. And so we want to highlight three key elements of effective classroom engagement. The first is really to establish ground rules. And we talked about community agreements as ways to create that psychological safety needed for students to take risks in their learning. And really, these shared expectations help students understand what's expected from them and what they can expect from others. The second here is using diverse materials. By incorporating videos, articles, tables, and other varied resources, we engage different learning styles and provide multiple entry points for our students to connect with the content. And this is particularly important when we're addressing complex or sensitive topics. And then lastly, facilitate structured discussions. Through techniques like think, pair, share, and talk moves, we can create equitable participation structures. And today we'll focus on talk moves as a powerful tool for deepening classroom dialogue. Really, the beauty of these strategies is their adaptability across grade levels. So whether you're working in elementary, middle, or high school, these core approaches can be tailored to developmentally appropriate implementations. And so on our next slide, in a moment, we're going to watch a video that really demonstrates how a teacher has created talk moves, which are conversational stems that allow all students to engage in difficult conversations. Now, these stems are posted at each student's desk for easy reference. And I think what's particularly important and valuable about talk moves is that they provide scaffolding for academic discourse. So students who might otherwise struggle to enter the conversation have structured entry points. And the visible reference cards ensure that students always have access to the appropriate language for engaging in discussion. Now, it's worth noting that, obviously we're using this here as an example in our adult, facilitation, and it can be used in PD, but really we want you to use this in your classrooms. And so we really want you to think about how can we use talk moves as ways to hold students, even hold them accountable to engaging in these conversations, have students learn to reason, reflect, and then build upon each other's ideas. And so by facilitating and implementing these strategies, you're not just teaching them the content, you're really developing their skills to communicate with others, which they'll not only need in the classroom, but in the real world. So as you watch this video, think about how you could incorporate these talk moves in your classroom.
These are the keys to participating in a conversation fully.
Sometimes we all need a little bit of a Kickstarter to feel like we can contribute. Children are going to struggle a bit, depending on how confident they feel in speaking up in class. And yet this teacher wants everybody in the class to feel valued. So the kids are all learning phrases that can inspire other kids to contribute more easily.
We're trying to build a conversation here that is a community of caring and respect. So look at your talk moves on the table today, and I have a post-it note here for you. Talk moves are essentially sentence starters that students can use to get themselves into the conversation and to draw other people into the conversation.
By the government, and they just can't figure out what to do.
I taped the talk moves right on the table so that they would be ever present in everyone's mind. Today, I want you to keep track of your talk moves. Every time they used a talk move, they put a check on their sticky note. So if somebody at your table looks like they don't have a talk move check mark yet, invite them into the conversation. How could you do that?
Say what do you think?
Definitely. Would you use their name?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Everything about activating a child's cognitive skills begins with activating their social connectedness. Verbalizing and using language and working with peers creates that kind of social stimulus that drives the development of the brain.
I pretty much look at the thing every single time to see if there's something I could say, like a clarifying question. Can you explain more about like why he would get in trouble?
He spray painted something on his rival soccer team's school, and he when you ask a person a clarifying question, it's either, oh, I heard you said, or can you repeat what you said, or to add on to.
They help enormously with language learners. They give everybody a platform to jump into a conversation because half the sentence is there for them already. But they also challenge other types of learners who may be accustomed to doing independent work and they need a bridge to collaborate more with a group. It pushes kids out of their comfort zone of social conversations and it moves them more towards a professional and an academic kind of register.
All his accomplishments in his past, like all the other marches he had, like Martin Luther King, his other previous marches, and he wants to help this next march.
I heard you say previous marches. Like, does it say anything about like?
Yeah, like he was in Martin Luther King marches.
I do talk moves because in order to have a great discussion, everyone has to feel like they're part of it and valued. And when they walk away, they really have bridged a gap with someone that maybe they wouldn't have necessarily talked to or talked to on that level.
This teacher is aware of children having different levels of comfort and discomfort, of making their skills visible, and she's getting kids to support each other's participation with these talk moves. This teacher created a pathway for every single child in this class to belong.
Conversation fully.
Okay, so as was stated in this video, talk moves are the structured prompts that help us facilitate deeper thinking and more equitable participation in our classroom discussions. Now, here are some sample discussion moves. On the left, we have prompts that encourage personal connection and reflection. How would you feel if this happened to you, right? Whatever it is the topic that you're talking about, whether it's, going to a boarding school as a Native American child growing up in the 1800s. Or what did you notice about blank while discussing this lesson? What did you learn that surprised you, and why did that surprise you? What would you like to know more of, right? And then consider what emotions or thoughts are coming up for you. On the right side, we have some prompts that encourage some analytical thinking, right? So based on what we read, discussed, or watched last time, why would blank respond this way, right? How does this new information change your understanding of this time period? Or can you explain what you meant by XYZ? Or tell me more about whatever it is that you're talking about, right? So these prompts are really here to push students to articulate their reasoning, make connections between ideas, and deepen their analysis. Any questions here? Any thoughts?
I also want to pause for any comments on the video.
Yes.
If there's any comments, any things that you saw, any aha moments, what did you notice about the way the teacher was facilitating the classroom or about the way the students were having discussion? Feel free to drop that in the chat or come off mute if you want to respond to the video. Talk moves are a great way to get those kids who are not as engaged as others talking and to create space for them, because sometimes they don't know how to just jump in, picking up the pieces for sure. So I'm sorry, Ronland, I'm turning it back over, but I just wanted to pause for the video.
Good. Absolutely. Providing students with the opportunity to lead, right? In these small groups, maybe have a couple of rotations on students that might be the ones facilitating these conversations and having some of these discussion prompts at their tables, right? So this next piece, we just wanted to check in. We'll do a quick poll and just select the category that applies to you. The first is talk moves will be useful to my classroom discussions. Two is I currently use something similar to talk moves in my classroom. Three, I want to learn more about talk moves. Or four, I'm not sure talk moves will be useful to my classroom discussion. So we're just going to take a quick poll, see where folks are at. Like 100% of folks think that talk moves will be useful to their classroom discussions and could certainly try to use them in these upcoming units or these final units to end out the year. All right, let's go ahead and move to the next slide. So we have some example content here. For elementary school educators, sorry there. For elementary school educators, standard 4G MM5 really asks students to explain how the contributions of indigenous tribes of Oregon and various historical and contemporary immigrant groups create the diverse culture of present-day Oregon, right? So some examples could include the exploration of cultural celebrations, languages spoken in the community, public artwork, and place names, right? And so notice how these entry points are age appropriate while still introducing important concepts about cultural diversity and contributions. And as you see here, we have some resources that we've created for you that'll be available, and they provide information about people groups of Oregon that offer developmentally appropriate ways to introduce students to these concepts and indigenous contributions to Oregon's heritage. And, we'll provide some links for you all when they're available that will really give you access to some student magazines, lesson plans, and other resources that are specifically designed for elementary school students and that will help them understand cultural diversity and respect in ways that build foundations for them to have complex discussions later on when they get to middle school and high school. So moving on to middle school, we see standard 6-7 GHE7, which asks students to identify and describe examples of how conquest and colonialism affected traditionally underrepresented identities, cultures, and communities. This standard really explored topics like forced migration, enslavement, land use practices, resource utilization, displacement, and different conceptions of land ownership and stewardship. And the resource that you see here really focuses on cultural assimilation and Indian boarding schools, particularly difficult but important topic in American history. And so again, we hope to provide you when they're ready these links for you to get access to some lesson plans, so some curriculum materials that will support teaching this standard. And then lastly, we have the high school content. The standard here is HSUSCC 5, which asks students to analyze primary sources from multiple perspectives to develop an argument about the conflict between traditionalism and modernity in the early 20th century. And this standard really provides examples including the Harlem Renaissance, shifting immigration pattern, the Great Migration, and the reemergence of the Ku Klux Klan, all very complex topics that involve discussions of race, culture, and inequity. Some of the resources that we have here provide valuable context for understanding tribal sovereignty as well as examining conflicts between traditionalism and modernity. The links provided at the bottom really, well, we will provide those links for you all when they're available. We'll give you some access to some high quality materials, culturally responsive materials that are essential for facilitating some meaningful discussions around these sensitive topics. So we are going to engage in a small group discussion and we're going to keep it whole group, I think. We're going to have 3 vignettes and, you can talk about which vignette is most relevant to your grade level. And we want you to consider how would you handle these critical classroom conversations? How would you maybe use the working agreements or remind students of working agreements? or discuss some strategies for ensuring that students feel comfortable and understand the importance of being respectful of other cultures. Think about some specific language you might use or how you would use any additional supports that might help students engage in meaningful ways. And you have in the next slide the three scenarios. So let's take a moment to read the scenarios, read the one that most relevant to your grade level, and then we can have a discussion. You can either put it in the chat or on mute.
And Roland, I was going to, for recording purposes, read out the engagement scenarios because I forgot to do that on the first one.
Yes.
Just for recording purposes. And then we're going to take a moment here, about 2 minutes to think through, and we'll come back together and talk about the scenario. So fourth grade, during the group activity where students discuss key facts about Oregon's indigenous communities, Lim said, "It's amazing how they lived here for so long." Drawing from a previous misunderstanding, Emma replied, "But they all left when others came, right?" Feeling upset by the oversimplification, Lim retorted, "That's not fair. They don't just leave. They didn't just leave. Many were forced by your people." The tension rose, and Miss Carter intervened to address the misconceptions and encourage respectful dialogue. So think about that conversation and the words that the students used. Moving into seventh grade, during poster preparations, Jordan asserted, "It's kind of like states being part of the country, but different." Sam replied, "But these people get more things from the government than others, right?" Jordan felt that statement was dismissive and responded, "You're just ignoring how hard it was for them." The discussion grew heated, and Mr. Lee facilitated a deeper exploration of the topic. 10th grade. Amid a critical discussion about tribal sovereignty, Casey mentioned, "I think it's cool they have their own laws separate from the US." Dylan, less informed about the complexities, commented, "But isn't it unfair that they get special treatment?" Casey was taken aback by the simplification and snapped, "It's not special treatment, it's rights they fought for." Miss Wynn calmly redirected the conversation to an informative discussion. So we're just going to pause there for 2 minutes, minute and 30 seconds, and think about how we would respond to these scenarios, given that we've learned about talk moves and community agreements thus far, and some of the things that we've discussed thus far. So take 2 minutes and think about that.
All right. Any thoughts here? Anyone want to unmute or put in the chat? How would you approach any of these scenarios in your classroom?
And even if not this specific scenario, if you've had something similar happen? How did you approach it? Or how could you use the things that we've surfaced thus far to handle it? Or how you wish you maybe would have had those tools to handle that particular situation? Feel free to share.
For sharing a Oregon-based example. So I can share in terms of maybe how I'd approach the seventh grade scenario when Jordan comments that, you know, kind of like part of the country but different, and Sam responds about government benefits leading to tension. I might remind students of the community agreements and thinking around expect and accept non-closure, right? Thinking about acknowledging that this is a complex topic with historical and legal dimensions that we're going to have to explore further. I'd also try to redirect our students with talk moves, maybe asking something like, based on what we read about tribal governments, can someone explain the legal basis for tribal sovereignty? Or how does this new information maybe change your understanding of the relationship between tribal nations and the federal government? And I'd ask Jordan, like, can you explain what you meant by states being different? And then Sam, can you share what led to your perspective about benefits? So, I think as teachers and educators, we can't be scared to, we can't just shut things down or like, oh, no, no, we can't talk about that, right? We have to encourage students to dig deeper and be able to facilitate these sometimes uncomfortable topics, right? I'd also think about providing some context for students, incorporating the resources that we showed you around cultural assimilation and Indian boarding schools to really help students understand the historical context of current tribal government relationships. Um, yeah, those are some of the things that I might do, and I might even use one of the working agreements around permission for collective breath to give everyone a moment to reset before we continue.
Thank you for that, Ronlyn. And I wanted to surface something that was shared yesterday during this part of the session, just around some of the language that the students are using. So, for example, if we look at the fourth grade scenario, particularly when Emma and Liam are talking, Liam responds, "That's not fair. They didn't just leave. Many were forced by your people." Right. And so we then have to realize that, students are coming into our classrooms with things that they are learning at home and that they are picking up on social media. And we want to make sure that we are clear in language, that we are very clear. And so, we would redirect Lamb to, not say your people, but to just say who are the people that is referring to. So are you referring to white settlers? Are you referring to people who were coming in and taking over the land, like colonizers? But we would want to use the correct language there, and teaching our students how to use the correct language, even when they're having these discussions and they get a little challenging, right? Making sure that they know who they're referring to when they say, it's rights they fought for. Who are they? Let's be specific when we have these conversations, because other students are listening and they may not be able to follow with what these students are talking about, right? And as the teacher, when you are de-escalating and redirecting the conversation to using the talk moves, you then want to like model using that language. So using people by names, saying the correct names. And so that was something that people really talked about yesterday. And I wanted to surface here because I think that's really important. As we talk through history, words have meaning and titles have meanings, and we need to use those words and those titles appropriately when we are having these historical conversations. So I wanted to bring that forward and make space for anybody else to come in and talk about any of these scenarios before we keep the session moving. Well, Ralyn, I will keep us moving into the last segment of our session this evening, which is our best practices showcase, and it's navigating these critical conversations. So we've, just as a quick recap of everything that we've kind of been picking up along the way, we started out with our community agreements. We learned about the importance of those and grounding our class in those community agreements, allowing students to really offer up what those community agreements are, coming to a consensus on them, and then honoring them every day, every time they step into your classroom, and then revisiting them, especially before some of these difficult, more critical standards that may come up. Revisiting those community agreements is a great way to kind of set the tone for the conversation. Then we also learned about engaging families. Why is it important to engage families? Because when we do that, it just creates a better connection and it builds trust amongst educators, families, and students. So we know that we definitely want to engage families. There are tools we can use, talk moves, we can use those when we're having these conversations. We can continue to build rapport with our students when having the conversation. So we want to do all of these things that can kind of lead us up to some of these last pieces that we are going to pick up here. And so one of the resources that we have created for you all, our Oregon educators, is a facilitating critical classrooms conversations fact sheet, which can now be found in the chat. Our tech just dropped it in the chat. And these are the 7 main components of that fact sheet. 1, know the content. It's no good to be in front of the students teaching if you don't know the content, especially when you get to some of these newer standards and you get to some of these more difficult conversations. Know your content. Reflect on your own cultural frames of reference. What are you pulling in? What are your own bias, implicit biases that you are bringing into, where do you get your content from? Make sure you are using inclusive authors that represent all of the people that are being examined during that time period, and that we're not just pulling from one particular genre or background when we're talking about different cultures. Understand your students, know where your students come from so you can know maybe who to lean into. They may have some historical background or context that they can offer to the class and to you, into your classroom. That was always one of my favorite things to do. Quick example, I had a Sikh student in my classroom, and when we got to that unit on religion in my class, I didn't really know much about Sikhism. I was coming into it. I had done my background, but not as much. She brought in artifacts. She told us things that the books could not tell us. And so it's important to, understand your students and establish clear objectives. Know what you're going in to teach, know what you want your students to walk out your classroom knowing. Prepare the physical and emotional space. Make sure it's a space where students feel welcome. They feel like they have an outlet if they need to get up and walk around. Maybe something's bothering them. Or in my classroom, we had an area, we call it the soft area. If you're having a hard time in class right now or dealing with something, go to the soft area and they could go there and just have a moment. But prepare that space, prepare your students, let them know we're going to get into some difficult things. We're going to be talking about identity, culture, race, whatever it is. Prepare them. And then last, prepare yourself for these challenging moments. Have your talk moves ready. Have your pivots ready. Have the things ready for you as the facilitator of the classroom so that you feel confident and that you can maintain any type of conversation. So that if Liam blurts out, it was your people, you know how to redirect him. If another student blurts out something that's derogatory, you know how to redirect that. Prepare yourself, because a lot of times educators can slip up and think that we are prepared for these conversations, and the students will surprise us and throw a curveball in there, and we are not prepared. And so we just want to make sure we do these things, and you guys you have access to this resource in your workbook. It's in the chat. And again, you'll be able to find it on the ODE website. So I want to pause to see if there's any questions about the critical conversations information sheet. Oh, and I see a comment in the chat from Lois saying, in regard to knowing content, don't be afraid to say, I don't know. I think the students are always posing the best questions that give us an opportunity to model curiosity. As once being a young teacher, that first year, I felt like I had to know all the answers. And I didn't like those gotcha moments where I felt like they were gotcha moments from my students. But when you change your mindset, like you said, and it's not a gotcha moment, it's a moment for you and your student to be like, let's look that up. Or, you know what? Take a moment, go ahead and look that up on your iPad or your tablet in class and let the class know what we find. And so I think that's a great opportunity to pivot and say, I don't know, let's look it up. Lois, that's going to be my aha takeaway today, is to, when you don't know the answer, just reach out to the source, right? They're waiting for us to reach out. So reach out to the source. Thank you for that. And
it makes you feel so good.
Right. And it's affirming them that they know that their work is still being read and used. And I'd love to make our historians feel good. And so in thinking about those critical conversations and how we do them, we want to build some perspective through meaningful discussion. So again, we learned about the talk moves. Even though that was an ELA teacher who was showing us how to use those, talk moves can be used literally in any subject, whether it's math, science, ELA, or social science. And so we want to make sure we're thinking about those talk moves, but then let's look at how this educator right here in a high school history class really works this classroom. And we want you to consider, what did you observe as educators and students were engaging in discussions, right? So as they are thinking, the questions that they're asking, maybe even their body language, just think about all of those things as we watch this video.
Today we prepped some kind of more personally reflective questions.
Because our school is willing to engage in courageous conversations, we are willing to honor the voice of the students in front of us.
Do you think you've been taught a role based on your sex?
How do these lenses affect how you view yourself?
We're trying to share our authentic experiences around these questions.
When students are adding to the conversation, they're feeling validated that their voice matters.
I can see like the effects of social media.
I can discuss whether or not Confederate monuments should be removed by listening to my peers and using evidence.
At the Springfield Renaissance School, we build in intentional time for us to have an open dialogue with students about events that may not exist in the textbook. There are events happening outside of our building that trickle into our building, and we can't ignore it. Adults have to be able to have those courageous conversations, and that means that you have to be in a place where you understand how to navigate through that.
I want to disagree with a lot of you saying that they're bad.
I came in very nervous to engage in conversations about race and equity, and so I think acknowledging that that's okay. It is okay to be uncomfortable when you're having a courageous conversation, because that's part of the growth and learning.
I always think about the big picture, and I'm like, so what can I do in my life to try and make the world more equitable?
We use discussion as an evaluation of students' understanding of specific content. So in this case, the daily learning target was I can discuss the motivations behind the women's movement and consider connections to my own life.
To prepare for the conversation, we had a document written in the 1900s called The Feminine Mystique, about the desire for women to do something more than just be a homemaker, a housewife.
In order to have a good discussion, you need to have students who are willing to get beyond just sort of the surface level of things.
If my grandpa says my cup's empty, she has to go and fill it.
Getting them to talk about their families, their own biases, their own experiences. It can be hard enough to get a teenager to engage in a conversation. You're adding a huge roadblock if you're not giving them some very structured time ahead to really plan out what they're going to say.
You need to acknowledge your own bias.
But you could tell that there are a lot of things that she wanted to do that she couldn't because she had to take care of us. I know
Mr. Glanis is one of those teachers that likes to connect everything back to current events. So by looking at how the feminist movement started in the 1900s and 1800s, we're connecting that back to how the feminist movement has changed from then to now.
He makes it known that you are close to this history. You still have to interact with us daily based on the structures that we see in our nation. He makes us want us to be aware of ourselves and each other. And I think he creates a culture where we don't have the option to opt out.
So last night I put my daughter to bed, I came down and sat on the couch, and I was sitting there and I was thinking, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna do the work just like the students do. So I started talking to my wife.
The questions, they were personal, so it gave me an in to be able to share some things about my own life.
So there's kind of some built-in inequity in my home in terms of career.
Especially being a male teacher teaching this content, being a white teacher in a school that's predominantly students of color. Anytime that I can bring my own humanity into it, I feel is important for modeling for them.
Maybe I need to be a little bit more kind of small scale, microcosm, and think about my own life, and think about how these things play out there.
Mr. Galanis, he's trying to change other people's lives by examining his very thoroughly, and so I feel those are just things that he demonstrates in his classroom.
So that's something that I hope to get better at.
I was listening very closely to everyone's point of views.
Women began to own their sexuality. It was something that they had that men couldn't have.
Hearing other people's stories really like opens an eye to see what it's like for other people.
Women have been like more sexualized openly, I think, today.
I disagree with that because I think that's going back to putting girls into their gender roles. And I think
especially in education, as a teacher, we have these insecurities about either talking about certain issues, being worried like, well, if I say this, then, you know, how are the kids going to react? How are the parents going to react? How is the principal going to react? So when you're letting yourself have conversations with your students that are hard, or conversations that people don't typically have, I feel like that brings a real shift to the kids, a real shift in consciousness.
It makes me feel so like grateful for our generation to be able to move past that and understand that there are people that are completely different.
Thank you all so much for engaging and watching that video. And every time I watch it, I just always pick up something new, and it makes me miss being in the classroom truly. Just having those Socratic seminars or being in those circles and talking to the students and having them discuss those topics. But I want to bring space to some of the comments that were in the chat while the video was going on. Great discussion questions, and then seize the moment, throwing out the lesson plan when kids are getting courageous. I think recently Harris said that fear is contagious, but so is courage and bravery. So I think that's so important. And as the teacher modeled that at the end, where he said, I sat down with my kid and did the homework like a student, and then came to class the next day with his notes. He saw his scribble scrabble and his highlights, and he was reflecting and talking about his moments. That's what it's all about. And that's how you really build that trust. So I'll be quiet because, again, every time I watch that video, I just love it. But I would love to hear from you all about what you took away from that video, anything that you learned, any insights or ahas. And feel free to drop it in the chat, or you can just come off mute. You don't have to raise your hand. That was another one, a big one for me too. When I first watched it, was just how even the students said our teacher always relates everything we learn in history back to current events. I don't know if you guys have participated in our previous sessions, but we discussed those essential disciplinary practices in session 1 and as well as in session 3. So definitely, if you've had a chance to think about those, think about how this essential disciplinary practices literally say connecting, historical events to current events. And so that teacher he's already doing it in his class, and his students are making those connections and being able to make those connections. And we want our students to be able to do that. We can learn so much from history for today. And we don't want our students to think history is just something of the past. And that's the only thing that they just need to study something of the past. It's going to help them better understand things that are happening today, things that are impacting them, laws, policies, changes that are happening around them and that are happening in our world. Literally, our students are living in a time right now in our classrooms where they are witnessing some unprecedented things that are happening with our U.S. Department of Education and our government. And it's important that we are connecting that to previous historical events that have happened where things similar like this have taken place. And so I want to pause because, Amit, I see you came off mute, and I want to invite you in to definitely comment and share.
Well, you took a lot of what I was going to say, because I was one of those teachers who always were trying to make that connection to current events. And sometimes because it was like very relevant to, like what a kid might experience or be thinking about. And other times because it was just a current event. It was like in the ether, and kids should know about it and be able to make that connection. And I think it's really important, and it is something that we were very deliberate about putting into the standards, just to remind folks that teachers that we really want you to make this relevant for students, and we really want our students to make that connection between history. And so even when we talk about the unprecedented events that we're seeing happening here, there are some precedents for some things that we can call back on, right? So we can think about President Jackson, and we can go back to the New Deal, and we can think about, other times when there's been challenges to things like, federal government, what it does, states' rights, and so there's many things to kind of connect, and so those make like can 1828 be relevant? Like, I think it can, if you think about the way that, the president back then was using his power and the challenge with the courts. So there's just so much to relevance in what we do if we make those connections for students.
Even as we talk about tariffs, right? What are tariffs? And
Yep.
when tariffs first came about and what that did to our, comparing it when they first came about to what they can do now, having students like look at that and do some research and discovery around that. I mean, I'm thinking of so many activities that I would be doing in my classroom
And
today.
Brittany, I mean, we've had 4 of these sessions. We haven't really brought in econ, but you just brought in econ. So that's a great connection to, right? The historical with the economics standards. We have some economic standards on tariffs. This would be a really good connection.
Great connection. So many ideas. We'll have to talk. That is super important when we get those different perspectives and more people can offer a different lens into what's going on and telling us. I think also our students are being inundated with all of the different news outlets who are giving things. So it then becomes our duty in the classroom to make sure we are offering those perspectives, but also giving them the facts, right? Giving them the stuff, providing those primary source documents that they can refer to and read from and learn from. And ODE has taken time to identify resources and websites where you guys can utilize primary resource documents, and we will share those out on the website and come in coming days as we finalize materials. But we do want to move into the final part of our vignette. And the questions that we want to consider are, how would you handle these critical classroom conversations? Consider how to inform parents of established community agreements and discuss strategies for ensuring students and families feel comfortable and understand the importance of being respectful of other cultures. So again, we saw at the beginning where the standards were introduced, and in the elementary, they sent out a notice. In middle school, they sent out a notice. High school didn't. We saw in the classroom how the situation transpired in each one of the classrooms. So elementary, middle school, and high school got a little heated there. And so we want to make sure we remember those contexts. And so now we're going to move to like the after effects of that. So the teacher has tried to redirect and calm the situation down, but we want to think about the final scenario of this, because we all know that it's not going to end in the classroom. It's most likely that you're going to need to do some follow-up as a teacher. So I'm going to read through the scenarios. We're going to take a moment to pause and think through how we would address these and then come back as a group and discuss. So for 4th grade, after class, Miss Carter reached out to both students' parents, explaining the incident and how it was handled, while inviting further discussion on the importance of understanding and respecting Indigenous histories. 7th grade, Mr. Lee contacted parents to explain the classroom incident, detailing the steps taken to clarify and resolve the differences, and emphasizing ongoing support for informed discussions at home. And then last, 10th grade, after the class, Miss Wynn was contacted by both students' parents to provide insight into the incident. So just think about the different ways that the situation was handled. Pause here, take a minute or two to think about how we would handle and engage with these scenarios. And so I hope you had a chance to think through how you would address these scenarios. I'm going to invite you to come off mute and kind of give us a holistic perspective of how you would have handled this, especially given the scenario in front of you, how the teacher handled it, respond to how they handled it, and then how you would handle it. And I'll add, as a previous middle school teacher, I definitely love the way Mr. Lee handled the situation by contacting both parents, explaining the incident, detailing the steps to clarify and resolve the differences, and also to just, emphasize ongoing support for the discussions. So I think that would be important to do, is to get ahead of it. Don't wait for the parents to reach out to you. You reach out to them. And so I've had incidents like that in my classroom where I was like, let me go ahead and reach out to the parents, tell them what happened in here between some students. It really was, it had nothing to do with our content. It was some outside drama that students brought into my classroom. But I still reached out to the parents and told them what happened, because I was the one who had to break it up and de-escalate the situation. So I still reached out to them. I think that's very important. When we look at Miss Wynn's class, right? Miss Wynn, poor Miss Wynn. We love Miss Wynn. We love her for her dedication, right? But Miss Wynn's probably likely tired after school. Maybe she has other responsibilities. I know in high school, the day never really ends in high school. So, she didn't contact anybody, but she was contacted by both students, parents. This is what we want to avoid, right? We want to be proactive in contacting parents. We want to be proactive in all the things we do. And so that's why we emphasize at the beginning of the session to make sure that we contact our parents at the beginning of the school year. Those first 3 weeks are critical to reaching out to those parents. Make sure you do it. Make sure you build some level of rapport, because you don't want parents reaching out to you over an incident that happened in your classroom. If anything, if you built rapport and you didn't report the incident, they'll likely not call you, because they would say, hey, maybe it's not as serious or it's not as important because Miss Wynn didn't call me. It was handled. So I'm going to leave it at that. But if there's no rapport there, then yes, those parents are going to contact you, because those kids went home and told those parents only their side of the story. And I'm pretty sure they added little details, a little razzle dazzle on there. So we want to make sure we build that. And then just quickly looking at fourth grade, Miss Carter also took a really great approach, right? She reached out to both students' parents, explaining the incident, and then just inviting further discussion on the importance of understanding and respecting Indigenous histories. So again, I know sometimes reaching out to parents can get lost in high school, but we set it up this way for a reason, right? We know that our high school students tend to feel like we won't reach out to their parents, but we need to make sure we're letting them know that we're still here in support and community, and we will very much reach out to their parents if something happens in class, if they get disrespectful, if things get heated. We want to get ahead of it. Is there anything anybody would like to add about the scenarios? Anything else around the scenarios? So then we are going to move into our intentional closing next steps, and I'm going to hand it over to Roland.
Thank you, Brittany. So we want to engage in an intentional close activity, which aligns with Oregon's SEL standards. And this is really a chance for us to bring closure to each experience, build a bridge to participants' knowledge and next steps in an intentional way. This is something that you can do with your students, making connection to your own work, demonstrating appreciation for one another, highlighting individual and or shared understanding of our content, and giving some time to really reflect on the impact of our shared experiences today. So for our intentional close today, we have this question: what is one strategy or insight you are taking away from today? And let's do a waterfall chat, which means you're gonna type your response, and then when I say go, everyone will go ahead and enter it in the chat. So take a couple minutes, type in your response, and then when I give the signal, we can all drop that in there together. Take about 30 seconds. Go. Awesome. So we have talk moves. I'm going to incorporate that in my classroom. Don't expect to have all the answers. Providing a safe space for students to share is a powerful tool for them to grow and connect. The reminder of the power of great questioning to deepen learning and inquiry, and then connecting with parents for good things, not just the negative things, right? And then we have talk moves again. So thank you all for putting that in the chat. It was our pleasure to engage with you today, and hopefully you walk away with this with some more strategies that you can use in your classroom. Before we go, we would love if you could please take the survey that's going to be put in the chat. We really do appreciate your feedback, and we look at this to make sure that we continue improving these engagements for you as we seek to roll out these new social science standards. Thank you again for your time. But before we go, we do have a slide on just some additional resources that will be available very soon. We'll have some Canvas modules around many different topics that will help deepen your learning around the social science standards. We also will have online resources with professional learning materials. Some of these sessions will also be available for you and your colleagues. They'll be recorded, and so they'll be posted up there so that, you know, if you weren't able to make it today, you can share that with some of your colleagues so that they can get this information as well. And then there's also going to be some statewide summit. Unfortunately, they're all full right now, but they are out there, and I think there will be resources that are tailored and coming out from that will be available for folks.
And I just wanted to add, we do
Yeah,
have just a few spots left at the Ben
Great.
Summit. So if you would like to go to Ben, reach out to any one of us here or anybody you receive the registration link from. They'll get that information to one of us and we'll get it to the right person. But they are still a few spots left in Ben. And also the survey can be found in your workbook. So if you forget to get the link from the chat or you want to fill it out later, the survey link is also in your workbook. But we definitely wanted to highlight that Ben still has a few spots left. And Amit, I see you came off mute as well.
I just want to say thank you for everyone for hanging with us today, and good luck with the rest of the year.
Yes, thank you guys so much for being here. We definitely appreciate you all being here. This completes our series. You'll be able to find these recordings on the website in the future. So you'll be able to refer back to them and share them out with other educators, as well as some facilitator guides that will go along with the series. So definitely take advantage of those and use those. Keep the workbooks, share those workbooks. People can utilize those workbooks and the content in them. But thank you so much for being here. We're going to let you out early, and you all have a good night.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.